sisters, hope you're having an awesome day. Are you ready to better understand yourself, your partner, and your marriage? Oh yeah, you will on today's episode. As soon as you hear something that you like and you think someone else will enjoy it, share it right away so you don't forget. That way they'll really get that value that you wanted to give them. You'll really be able to help them and not be like, I meant to and I didn't. So remember. Now, for today's show, I am super excited to be bringing with you the co-host of the One Extraordinary Marriage, an amazing, amazing show that if you don't know about, you will want to go and listen to. They also just released a brand new book called The 6 Pillars of Intimacy, and we're going to learn more about it today. Thank you so much, Tony and Alisa, for being here. I am excited to be here speaking with you. You want to start by telling us how you guys met?
Oh my gosh. That was
27 years ago.
27 years ago.
Well,
yeah.
Wait a minute. We are like 27 years this week.
This week, as of
congratulations.
Beginning of June.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot that.
So I had applied for an internship program at the University of Colorado Boulder, had actually been denied, waitlisted. And just a couple of days before the internship program started, they called and said, hey, we've got a spot. Do you want to fly out to Boulder? And I was like, yes, please. I was living in Columbus, Ohio at the time for that summer.
With her folks. She would have been staying with her folks for that summer.
Yeah, it was the summer before my senior year in college. I'm like, let's see, Columbus, Ohio, Boulder, Colorado. I'm there. Yeah. And they had rented a fraternity house for us to live in for the summer and had actually hired 4 of the fraternity guys to be like, they called them hashers. So it was like the morning cook.
Yeah.
I think you guys are all cooks and
yeah, we all had certain jobs. So basically I got the job that summer in our house because it was being a cook, clean up around the house, take care of the stuff, and you got free room and board. Well, I had just turned 21 and I was like, this is killer because I need somewhere to stay this summer and I really don't have a lot of money, nor do I want to get like 3 jobs. And so I was the morning cook, which didn't work out great because I just had turned 21 and I'd have to have breakfast ready by like 6:30 or 7.
Yeah. That was not good. That was not good. But we met because I was an intern and that was the summer, really dating us. That was the summer of the O.J. Simpson
car chase.
So we like parked ourselves in front of the TV and did that. There was World Cup soccer that summer as well. And so we started bonding over just, sitting in front of the TV and Tony being the morning cook. And then, we just started having conversations.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning 27 years ago.
Oh, wow. So how do you say like 27 years later, so much has happened besides for just like being married, like most couples, you work together, you work on marriage. How has it affected your own personal relationship?
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Well, we've been studying marriages now for over 11 years. But prior to that, we didn't work together, obviously. Right. We did our own businesses. We had our own things going on. Alisa worked corporately early on in our marriage. So there were a lot of different places over the years where we were not side by side working with one another.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah, it's probably a really good thing back in those days.
In the early days.
So we went through our highs and lows through all those times, which got us to this point though where we can work together.
And really, when we are forced, just by the nature of what we do between podcasting and coaching and writing courses, we're forced to confront a lot of things in our own marriage, right? In our own relationship to go, okay, what's not working? Because when you're, as a coach, I'm constantly talking to people and I'm very transparent with my coaching clients about what's going on in our own relationship as a way to instruct them and share with them on theirs. And so we constantly have a mirror up to the 2 of us going, okay, what does this look like? I mean, we just recorded a Take Action Thursday with in the one family. And we're talking about quality time and how we spend quality time. And, in talking about that, Tony and I are like, we haven't been really good at it lately.
Yeah.
And so because of what we do in the audience that we serve, we're constantly being forced to evaluate and level up our own marriage.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So you want to tell us what the 6 pillars of marriages are and how do they play out?
Yeah, well, the 6 pillars of intimacy, I mean, this is we've been talking about different forms of intimacy, literally from our first book, Strip Down 13 Keys to Unlocking Intimacy in Your Marriage. And this idea that intimacy is more than just sex really, I mean, it goes all the way back to 2010 when we first started the show, and 2011 when the books were starting to come out. And it's this idea that, if you ask 100 people, probably 99, if you say what's intimacy, 99 people are probably going to say, well, it's sex. And yet in a healthy marriage, you aren't having sex 24/7. Right. And for those that say it's, don't say it's sex, they might say, well, it's just, it's the conversations. It's that emotional intimacy.
Yeah, the connection. That's come up more in the last few years.
In the last few years.
When we first started, you said intimacy and everybody was just like, it's sex. And over those years of just talking to so many couples, we had it in our first book. It was crazy to think about that, but it evolved over the years. And last August, we were able to give a talk in front of a group of married couples, and we presented the 6 pillars of intimacy. And it was then that it really began. We could see the light bulbs go off in people's minds and in their marriage, and talking to them afterwards, even just shortly after getting off stage, they're just like, we need to address this pillar. We need to address these pillars. There's crack. And so it was just like, oh, okay. What we've been doing and pouring into marriages, doing the podcast for 11 and a half years, writing the books, doing different content, this, that, and the other, it allowed us to finally go, this is where we need to be to help marriages.
And the 6 pillars, emotional intimacy, right? How the two of you are talking, both the verbal and the nonverbal language. You've got your physical intimacy, all the touch, right? Touch, skin's your largest organ, right? So it's all the different touches that connect you, specifically the non-sexual touches.
Yeah.
Because those are a really vital part of a marriage. You've got your financial intimacy, so everything related to money, to retirement, to investments. You have your spiritual intimacy. Yeah. How do the two of you operate within faith, and what does that look like? You have your recreational intimacy, how you spend time together. What are you doing for dates? What are you doing for fun? All of that. And then you do have your sexual intimacy, right? Everything related to sex.
I love how you put it last.
Well, because it's the one that everybody thinks of first. So we want to get through all of them.
Let's get through it. And now because you put those 5 together, you get those cracks all sealed up, and those pillars strengthen. That 6th one, that sexual intimacy is going to be rocking for you.
Totally. Which makes me wonder, like, exactly what I was thinking while you're talking about, if there's a specific order that couples have to work on first.
Great question.
There isn't necessarily a specific order. Definitely emotional intimacy, right? Because how the two of you communicate verbally and non-verbally is really going to drive what happens in the other 5, right? Because communication, literally, we call it the workhorse of the pillars, right? Because how you talk about money, or how you communicate how you're feeling about your finances, all of that comes back to the emotional intimacy. But what's really neat, as we've been studying pillars, right, from an architectural standpoint, pillars do 3 things in architecture, right? If you think about the greatest monuments that all have pillars, pillars add strength, they add beauty, and they have the ability to carry weight. And so that's really what these 6 pillars do in a marriage. They do this, they add the strength. As they become strong, they beautify your marriage, because people start to look to you and they're like, what are you doing with your finances? Or you guys are always dating. Like, what's that about? Yeah. And they really provide the opportunity to carry weight when there's, stuff going on in your marriage. So as you strengthen your emotional intimacy pillar, you can start to see the others strengthen. And what a lot of people discover is that they might have one pillar that's really strong already, and then they can take those strengths and shift it to another pillar to then address the cracks and strengthen that as well.
Yeah, you're not like totally doomed and like just have to start thing and you don't know what's going on here. It's like you're finding like, hey, I'm actually pretty good physically or spiritually, and I'm going to take those skills that I have there and bring them over.
Love it.
Exactly.
Yes, you get it.
Is there a specific one that you think people have the hardest time with?
Oh,
the hardest time with.
I think there's 2 that we hear by and large, and this is not going to be a gender thing. I want to say that from the get-go. Emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy, the 2 on either end. There are a lot of couples that struggle with emotional intimacy. And it's not just men that struggle with being emotionally intimate. And there are a lot of marriages where there's a struggle with sexual intimacy, and it's not just women that struggle with sexual intimacy. But those 2, probably the majority of the messages that we get deal with one of those 2 intimacies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Okay, what were you saying? Go.
And I was going to say the financial intimacy one is the one where people go like, they sort of scratch their head and they go, what? Why? Like that it doesn't compute. Like it feels off and awkward to them. And yet finances permeate our lives,
Yeah,
in our marriages and how we're using them. So we see that one being one that has to be addressed.
Because it's not something most people think about.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. It's like people just don't like, it's part of your life, but you don't think about it. Like, hey, I have to actually talk about this before I get married, like things like that. But going back to what you were saying about the emotional and sexual, it's interesting because emotional, you put first as like the foundation. You need that one first. And the sexual, if you have all the other ones, it's going to go and fit. Like that's just what's going to happen. So it's interesting to see that those are the ones that people have a problem with, because either they're saying they don't have the foundation, or they're saying the sexual, but it's because probably, obviously there's also specific things for the sexual, but because probably something having to do with the other pillars.
Yeah.
Right. Because, I mean, we've often said on the show, it's very hard to be physically naked in that act of sexual intimacy if you don't feel safe being emotionally naked, if you don't feel safe talking about your finances, if the two of you aren't spending time together. Like there are a lot of things that lead to great sexual intimacy. And if you are missing components of that, then the sexual intimacy, it's like a barometer, right? A temperature gauge for your marriage, going, okay, what's going on? If we aren't working sexually, what else is going on in our marriage? Because usually it's not just the sexual intimacy.
Right. Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if someone wants to improve in any or all of them, what do you suggest?
Got to be intentional.
And take action. You have to do two things in marriage and in life, I think.
Yeah.
Wherever you want to press in, but specifically in your marriage, you're going to have to be intentional. You're going to have to take action. And where are you going to do that? If you're looking at a pillar and you see that there's a crack in it, and you're going, okay, let's just take the financial intimacy one, for instance. The crack could be you have debt. And I don't know how much that may be, but we're going to just say you have debt. And that is straining your relationship. That's straining the time you get with your spouse. You have to choose, like, what are you going to do? You're going to have to be intentional around that pillar. What are you going to do to strengthen it? And then you need to take action. When Alisa and I were $50,000 in debt, this is way before we ever even thought of the 6 pillars of intimacy, but it was stressful. There was pressure, there was strain, there were arguments, there was frustration, there was everything. Nothing changed until we started being intentional.
Right.
And one of us had to start somewhere, and that's what we had to do.
So what if like one person wants to start and the other one is like, nah, I'm not ready. Like, I know this is a problem, but I don't know if it's changing. Now what?
So I love that question because that happens a lot in marriage, right? Where one person, we could be talking about changing. We could talk about listening to a podcast, whatever. Somebody's like, I want to do this. And the other person's like, whatever. We actually adopted for the one family, the hashtag, what can I do? And that really drives so much about what we talk about at One Extraordinary Marriage. Instead of looking at, well, we have to do this together, right? Really coming from this place of what can I do? What can I do right now to strengthen our emotional intimacy or our financial intimacy? Even if I don't necessarily have the buy-in from my spouse, what can I do? Can I make sure that we're spending, 10 minutes where I put my phone down? So I'm just going to give my spouse undivided attention. Can I make sure when we go out on date night that I've got some questions prepared? So we're not just sitting there talking about the kids and the bills and the chores. Yeah. Can I intentionally touch my spouse because I know that they like to be hugged or they have their hands held? What can I do? Really produces this sense of empowerment. Instead of waiting for your spouse to do something, you just take action.
Yeah, things aren't just going to happen just by sitting like that. So you take responsibility on your part, do what you could do, not blaming the other person, and then another person will come along when it's done in a healthy way. Now, do you find that some people value certain pillars more than others?
Good question.
When you say value, what do you mean?
Like, let's say someone says, I think the physical is more important than the financial, or the spiritual is more, like something like that.
I think there tends to be more emphasis placed on a pillar when it has cracks in it. Meaning that if a couple isn't strong in their sexual intimacy, let's say there's been a lot of rejection, or it's very routine, or it's infrequent, or, any of those types of things, it can feel like one spouse is placing a lot of emphasis on that, but it generally comes from, this underlying sense that there are cracks there. And so they'll press for the sexual intimacy, or if a couple's not talking to one another, they don't have deep conversations, it can feel like all my spouse wants to do is, they just want to have a conversation. They're always saying, can we talk? And so it's not so much that the emphasis is placed on one. Usually if you're hearing from your spouse, oh, we don't do this, or we never do, that sense of an emphasis is really because there's a sense of lack or disconnect around that pillar.
Can I share something though too with the 6 pillars of intimacy? What we have found with these pillars, it helps couples though to be able to put into words where there are cracks. Before, what would happen is we would get couples and they're like this and this and this, and they're just grabbing like all this is going on. Now they're able to go, okay, I see what's going on in our marriage, or I see what's going on in my own life. And they can touch, or they can reach out to a pillar and go, that's the one. And I think the biggest one, the value for anybody is going to be that one where there's a feeling of like, there's maybe loss, there's a hole, there's something that just isn't fitting together, and they know they want it. And we all know that feeling. I mean, I have it at times, and I'm sure you do too. And that's the one that we go reaching for, going, that's where we need, or that's where I need to be intentional and take action.
Yeah, it's about really like giving you the words, like making it really clear for what's going on here. Like, there's a problem, but I can't express myself. I'm not sure what it really is, but like, hey, now I see it's like the emotional intimacy part, or whatever else is going on for you. Like making it clear, like we're both on the same page. We know this is what we have here, and let's go and work on it.
Definitely.
Exactly.
So I'm curious to know why, like one of the problems, like I'm thinking of like different situations and problems that could come up in a marriage, and why isn't one of the pillars, it's not really about marriage so much, but it does cause a lot of problems in marriage, is like family, whether it's like kids or extended family.
Part of the reason that outside of the couple, family, like you said, we'll call it kids, we'll call it extended family, is that there's a lot of time and attention that are necessary to foster those relationships, right? Our children, especially when they're younger, require a lot of time and energy. When they're first born, highly dependent, right? Like they need a lot. And even as they grow up, there can be a lot of focus on them. And so that can pull the attention away from a couple if they're not intentional about making time for just the two of us. On the other end, if you've got, extended family parents, they can actually start to pull the attention saying, oh, well, you need to come to our house for every Sunday dinner, or we expect you to go on vacation with us, or you need to call me 3 times a day, or whatever that might be. And so again, it's how do you protect this husband and wife relationship? And actually, as you are a married couple, this is the primary relationship, because you are demonstrating to your children, the generation behind you, on how to do marriage, so that when they grow up, they understand what it looks like. And you're separating from your parents, which can sometimes be hard for parents, but again, demonstrating that this is the primary relationship.
Yeah. And both of those, because we are human and because we love people and we want to, it just depends on where you're at. As a parent, you want to see your kids being raised as a son or a daughter. You want to, there are probably standards that you have that you want to, that your parents expected you to live by. And those are all intertwined and how were you brought up and what did you see in marriage? And so each one of those relationships takes, and one thing that Alisa and I just realized over the years was this relationship, though, more than any of them, has to be strong. We need to continuously strengthen it. And we've put guardrails around our marriage. We've had to say no at times. We've had to say, this is us. We've had to have those hard conversations with kids and with parents and other loved ones. And sometimes that can be very painful. And yet at the end of the day, Alisa and I, we took those vows on our wedding day almost 25 years ago and said, till death do us part. And we are going to live those out. And so that's how we live. And no matter what stage of life or marriage you may be in, you're always going to have in-laws. You're always going to have outlaws. There's always kids coming in and out, and brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles. And so make this strong.
Yes.
So when you go out into the world, you guys are holding hands together, that physical touch, and you guys are holding hands together going, we're a team and we're strong and we're going to face those together.
Yeah, so it's really about the pillars of making your marriage strong. So that way, when you have other challenges, whatever it is, whether it is family or something else, you are your foundation is you have that power, you have that strength to really go and work things out.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, what has like making these 6 pillars, like putting them out there, making them really clear, done for your own marriage?
I think for us, Tony and I are not perfect.
No.
Like you said a minute ago, we're about to come up on 25 years. They have not all been rainbows and unicorns. We've had a lot of challenges, but really over the last 11 and specifically the last year where we've really been focused on the 6 pillars, it even gives us language in our own marriage. It becomes that framework, just like we share with the one family, that framework that adds strength to our marriage, that carries weight, so that when we get frustrated with each other, we're like, okay, our marriage is not falling apart. We're not getting a divorce. We just need to spend more time in a particular pillar because we've got a disconnect. I mean, last year during COVID, we had one of our worst fights ever. It was the first time in 24 years where Tony actually got up and left a room in the middle of a fight, because that's not his behavior. Usually that's me. And I watched him leave and I actually laughed. I was like, he just walked out of a room, right? And it was because there was a huge disconnect, not just in our emotional intimacy, but in our recreational intimacy. Because while we had been together 24/7 since COVID started, we weren't having fun together. We just happened to be in the same house.
Yeah.
And we took,
during that time, we did what we call our walk and talks, and we'd go to the beach, once or twice a week. And that just got cut off. And I think for me, I didn't realize how much I valued that.
Mm-hmm.
I valued the time being outside, just walking with Alisa by my side, hearing the ocean, and that was gone. And so we began to see that and going, oh, wow. Okay, there's a crack that's really impacting one of us and the other.
And both, yeah.
Right. Obviously, one of you are suffering, the other one's also.
Always.
And then it was impacting the others. And so you just start to see that again. And just recently, again, around recreational intimacy, it's ups and downs. But we just realize with where we are, what life is going on, instead of walk and talks, we've just switched that a little so we can have that time together.
Yeah, it really makes it really easy to pinpoint, not just like, oh, I have a problem. He walked out of the room. That's it. My marriage is breaking up after 25 years, but rather, no, like we have a problem in this specific area and we can go and even get help, like specializing in this specific area, right? So if you need help financially, whatever it is, then you go and you get help for that versus just like a marriage counselor that could be helpful, but not helping you for your specific thing.
And that's what a lot of people we've heard over this last year as people begin to understand the 6 pillars. There are a lot of people that instead of saying my marriage is over, my marriage is falling apart, they're actually, because they've heard this concept and they understand the concept and the framework, they're now going, oh, wait a minute. It's not like we're over. We just need to get help in this particular area. And it's helping couples to identify what's going on in their marriage, just like it helps us. And it's helping them to take action specific to whatever pillar has a crack in it. Because if you know where the cracks are, you're not trying to put financial help on, spiritual issues. You're going, no, wait, we need to get help in our spiritual intimacy. Right. And so now there's this empowerment and this hope that's happening.
Yeah.
And it's super exciting to see couples take action because they've got this language to use, not just with themselves, but with their spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also doesn't make you feel like, oh, I'm all bad. Like, okay, so 5 of my pillars are okay. 5 of my pillars are good. I have like this one thing or 2 things that I have to work on, but like, we'll be fine. We'll make this totally work out.
Exactly. And now you're not, again, what I was saying before, you're not just reaching for stuff and trying to, you can go, just like you said, 5 of the 6 are awesome. Like, what are we doing? Like, let's also look and celebrate the wins in marriage too. Too often we go to that negative side, and Alisa and I are very much about celebrating wins and what's good and what is happening. Like, and you can hold on to those and go, their strength. Like, we have an amazing sexual intimacy. Like, all right, cool. So how do we take that and that passion into our financial intimacy?
Yeah. Okay. Now on like a little bit different thing. What is you being you, the amazing couple that you do, helping tons and tons and tons of people? How do you, like, is there a challenge that you have in your relationship that you want to work on? I'm sure you're like working on it, but like challenge that you have.
So from my perspective, I mean, our 18-year-old's getting ready to go to college. And we also have a upcoming sophomore in high school. And so we are really navigating the beginning stages of empty nest.
Yeah.
Because our daughter, the sophomore, she's going to be getting her driver's license soon. She already has a ton of freedom. She's out doing things with her friends. The other one's going to college. Like, there are lots of times now where we are home alone in an empty house, and really beginning to navigate what does the emotional and recreational intimacy look like when it's not revolving around high school sports or driving somebody to a friend's house, or, somebody's got to go to a birthday party or things like that. So we really, I think over the last probably 6 weeks, have been having more conversations of going, what are we going to look like in this next season of marriage? Because it's rapidly advancing to the point where we're going to be an empty nester very soon. And so that, for me, that's the challenge.
Yeah, I would say for my two, when I think about that question right now, financial intimacy, with everything that Alisa said, there's just dynamics that are happening that you're just, wow, you got a kid going off, and, the expenses are sort of shooting up, and you're trying to figure what does that look like. And you ask the question, when, how do you make it so that the kids or parents don't start impeding? Well, you have a kid who's leaving, and I'm very much of like, kick him out of the house and he can go do it. And mom,
I'm having the stress.
My beautiful wife, Alisa, is having the stress and waking up in the middle of the night thinking about the finances for him. And so I think that's one. And then our second one for me would be our spiritual intimacy. We go to church together. We serve together. We lead together on certain things. I just feel like there are just definitely times when we can do it well outside of the home, but when we come into the home, how are we doing that? What does we listen to worship music and things of that nature, but that's even different because I love music. I can listen to music all the time. Elisa's like, don't turn it on. It bothers me. Like it distracts her. For me, I'm just like, it's background noise. I don't even hear it. Yeah. So those are the two I would say. So 4 out of 6.
4 out of 6.
Well, you're good. No, but again, right? Like you said, you have the language. It's like, this is happening. Your marriage is changing. Your life is changing. And it doesn't have to be worse. It's going to be better. It's going to be different. And you have that language. You have that tools to really go and make it think that you don't have to get worried. Like, what's going to happen to my marriage? Even though
everything we do here at One, we use. Everything we do here at One, we go through it.
It's like written all over you.
Yeah. And it is at the start of the podcast, when we started the podcast, 11 and a half years ago, we always said we were going to be open, honest, and transparent. Those are the 3 things. And hey, through good and bad, you got to just let it go, because that's life. And we want other marriages to see that they're not alone when those times come that it feels like you got a big crack in a pillar. It's like, you're not alone. We've been through that, and we'll probably go through it again in some season in life again. So let's walk through that with you and allow you to see like real things are going on here. We don't live in a bubble.
No. Yeah. And you really do go and make it really real. Another question. What is like one ritual that you have in your marriage that makes your marriage so amazing?
I'll start.
Go ahead.
I love it.
Wow, you were ready for that question.
Awesome. Right. This is sexual intimacy pillar.
Yes.
Intimacy lifestyle. So this is us scheduling sex. That has been honestly the hallmark and a ritual we have had now for 13 years.
Wow. I was actually going to say that too.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go.
High five,
me, girlfriend.
Okay.
That's a ritual that we have honestly stuck to for 13 years. And it has allowed us to grow in ways that I never expected. And in times when we have sex twice a week. That's our goal every week. Minimum is twice a week. And so it's ebbed and flowed over the years, but that has allowed us to stay like connected, even when we're not connected in the other pillars.
Yeah.
That one brings us together, and we're forced to like
Well, we choose.
No, we're forced to.
You chose to make this ritual. You chose to work on it.
I'm like, force put you in the position.
No, listen what I was going to say. You're not. No, it forces us to connect emotionally, physically, sexually. Instead of that's what I was trying to say. I'm forcing you to have sex.
Like 30 minutes listening, they're like, what?
It forces us though.
You can't even try to say that you're forced you to have sex because like you don't even like look like the type to even be able to, even if you want to.
No, but I'm like, where's she going with that? It just, we have to deal with our stuff. Mm-hmm. If we're going to get physically naked, we have to deal with our stuff. And that's a ritual that I've cherished and hope we continue to do for many, many years.
It's been a game changer because literally for the first 11 years of our marriage, I mean, sex was basically hit or miss. And it wasn't like I didn't place any value on it in our marriage. And because if you look at the 6 pillars, and this was before we knew and had studied and identified the 6 pillars, this was a pillar that wasn't even standing. It was like somebody forgot to add it into our marriage house, right? So it was just like absent. And so there was always this like teetering in our marriage. And so in the last 13 years where we've been building this, there are so many things that because that pillar can carry the weight, right? Because it adds strength to our marriage, it really it's been a game changer.
It has.
For us because it impacts all of the other pillars.
Wow. I know never going to have a problem. If I ask you in like another 20 years time, what challenges you're having now, I know it's not going to be from your sexual ones.
Not at the rate we're going.
Although
20 years is an age.
I'll be 68 years old, so I don't know.
Although, funny thing is, just even with you talking about age, I mean, we have a lot of couples in the one family that have been married 30, 40 plus years. And these are couples that because they, again, going back and understanding the 6 pillars, understanding the importance of sexual intimacy still being a pillar into your, 50s, 60s, 70s, there are a lot of couples for whom their sexual intimacy is still a vital component of their marriage into their 60s. As some of these couples are actually having like the best sex of their lives, way past the age when people think that you should be having sex. And so it's entirely possible.
Oh yeah. It's just setting your expectations. And as we go through life and through marriage in 20 years, the expectation may be different. The expectation may be
no pressure.
Who knows? We'll walk it and we'll deal with it as we come to it.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, totally. And then do what works for you. What is your situation, right? Like talking about change. Well, yeah, that's totally what's going to be. Now I'm curious to hear, what do your kids think of these 6 pillars and the work that you do? Like what's their, do you like view them like what's going to happen like when they get married and like, or you don't, not so much?
So our kids were 4 and 7. When we started the podcast. And I actually had the revelation earlier today that we've been doing the podcast for almost the entire time that our oldest one has been in school, right? Like because he just graduated from high school. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, 11 and a half years, 12 years. Yeah. So partway through first grade, we started doing the podcast. Our kids know about it. We're very candid in talking to them about relationships. I mean, we have conversations, we're talking about sexual intimacy and what that looks like as they're growing up, as they were going through puberty, all of these kinds of things. So I think both of them have a more advanced language around relationships and what that looks like. The work that we do, the podcast, I mean, I know specifically our daughter has gotten into cars with her friends and, where it's been a situation where the mom was listening to the podcast, picked up kids from school or after school activities and, turns on the car and all of a sudden, our daughter's hearing our voices and she's like, oh my gosh.
Teenager. Yeah.
Total, like, this is embarrassing. Those are my parents. I think by and large,
they have a fantastic foundation. We talk about this with them. I don't know how much they know about every little nuance or the 6 pillars of intimacy even. I would assume as they get married or even start dating and getting engaged and all that, we'll start talking more to them about those things.
Also, probably as they mature, they'll like want to know more, like go back to your previous episodes. And
and the show is and we've had this conversation, the show is a really interesting legacy because since 2010, it's been Tony and I having a conversation about our marriage, about life, about how to do relationships. And so our kids, whether they want to embrace it now as a teenager, which they don't, or perhaps at some future time as they step into marriage themselves, they actually have this gift of hearing what we've thought on all of these different topics. They could go back, or their spouses could go back at some point in time in the future. So it's a really interesting legacy that we never intended it to be a legacy for our own children, but it is there for them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be just for ours. And that's the beauty of the One Extraordinary Marriage show. It's not just our kids. We've been blessed to speak into so many people's lives. Mm-hmm. And I would say as a parent, if you have a child who is married or maybe getting into that place, share it with them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've known many of moms and dads who, their marriages have been honestly transformed, and they're passing on the show. They're telling their kids about the 6 pillars of intimacy. And it's like, you don't have to talk to them about it. Maybe you don't have the vocabulary. Maybe you just feel embarrassed trying to talk to your own kid. Just put the show, give them, share it with them.
Yeah.
And that's the legacy we get to leave. So it's pretty cool.
I love it so much. Okay, so before we get to our final question, where could Life Fixers connect with you, learn more about you? Obviously, your podcast, but where else?
Best place to go, oneextraordinarymarriage.com. Mm-hmm. That is the best place to go to find the show, like you said. I mean, go to your favorite podcast app and you go to One Extraordinary Marriage Show, search that. You'll find it on any podcast app. But go to oneextraordinarymarriage.com. You can find everything we got going on there, from the podcast to books to articles to everything and anything else.
It's all there.
It's all there.
Awesome. Okay, so for our final question, one that I ask everyone is, how would you describe an extraordinary relationship coming from One Extraordinary Marriage? No, not really, but like as I was saying, I was like, that's you. Without using honesty, transparency, and intimacy.
Okay, so how do you describe an extraordinary relationship without using honesty, transparency, or intimacy?
An extraordinary relationship is one where both parties are intentional and take action.
Ooh, I like that.
None of the words, all the action.
That's it. I like it. I second it. Good job.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was fun. I really appreciate you coming on here and taking the time to share your value with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of the Life Fix University podcast, but I have a huge favor to ask of you that will not only support the show, but will also help the people you love most. We are striving for 1 million downloads by the end of 2025, and we can't do this without your help. If you love this episode, please share it with 2 of your family and friends so they too can rewire their brains to have an extraordinary marriage. It was awesome spending time with you, and I'll see you on the next episode.